Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. We are bringing you a special report from Tel Aviv from our Middle East correspondent, Lia Tarachansky. Lia, you're there on the ground. How are things looking in terms of the public opinion in Israel now that we're seeing that 700 Palestinians have been killed thus far in the Israeli assault?
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Jessica. I've been running between Israel and the West Bank in the last few weeks, and what we're seeing here is a rising movement of dissent among Palestinians, which is very common during Israel's aggressions against the war. And these protest movements, we've seen on Saturday tens of thousands on the streets of Nazareth in northern Israel, and for 3 straight weeks, almost every day protests all over the West Bank, and huge protests tonight as we're sitting here talking all over the West Bank. Which are anti-war protests that are being repressed by the Palestinian Authority. 2 days ago, the Palestinian Authority opened live fire on anti-war protesters in Nablus, seeing once again that it's another tool of the Israeli occupation. Here inside Israel, there's been also a growing anti-war movement amongst Israeli Jews, but I mean, these are almost marginal numbers. The first protest, there was 500 people. The next protest, 1,000 people. On Saturday, there's going to be a big protest with 2,500 people at least attending. And so every Saturday night, it's been growing a little bit. What we've also seen is since the finding of the bodies of the 3 kidnapped teenagers, there's been just a rampant and uncontrollable wave of neo-fascism on the streets here. There have been groups mobilizing all around the country. They've been attacking on the streets people who speak Arabic. They've been attacking all the anti-war protests, trying to pick off activists one by one and beat them. Recently, the police decided to do its job and separate them from the anti-war protests. But what they do more often than not is that when the neo-fascists attack the anti-war protesters, they separate the two groups and then kick the anti-war demonstration out of the streets. So again, helping in stopping dissent. And tomorrow there's going to be a big demonstration in Jaffa, and on Saturday another big demonstration in Tel Aviv. So we're seeing a lot of these protests happening despite the almost total support in Israeli society for the war, and the often gross representation of that support in the form of groups yelling "Death to all Arabs," "Kill all the Arabs." We've seen groups of neo-fascists running around mixed cities in Haifa and Jaffa and Nazareth saying, turn Gaza into a cemetery, turn Gaza into a parking lot, expel all the Arabs, and Muhammad is dead, as we reported here on the Real News.
But Lia, I mean, for these supporters, they must ask themselves, where is this all going to head? Because you folks in Gaza saying that they want this to end. They want the blockade to end. What's your take?
Well, I have to remind our viewers a little bit of the timeline of this escalation, this little war. Israel has been bombing the Gaza Strip throughout its entire operation, Bring Back Our Boys, in the West Bank. So while they were looking for those who kidnapped these 3 teenagers in the West Bank, they began bombing Gaza intensely for 2 weeks, long before the war ever started. By the time Hamas actually decided to respond, 2 weeks had passed. At that point, when Hamas responded, Israel declared it an official war, an official operation, and demonstrated to the whole planet that its citizens are under rocket attacks. So far, these rockets have killed 2 people because Israel has a very good defense system. We have bomb shelters everywhere, and sirens go off whenever rockets are being launched into city centers. There's the questionable efficacy of the Iron Dome anti-defense missile system, but in any case, we have a way to defend ourselves, and you have to remember that most of these rockets are homemade. They don't cause a lot of damage unless they landed, for example, as they did 2 weeks ago in a gas station. Having said all that, on the second day of the war, the Hamas party offered Israel a ceasefire on the second day. They said what they want is the end of the siege and the end of Israel's attacks on the Gaza Strip, and they included a third term, which they were asking for, which that is Israel release the prisoners that were released in the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange deal, but were rearrested in recent weeks. So Israel took advantage of the fact that nobody was paying attention and rearrested a lot of the political prisoners that it so publicly released the year before. So the Hamas party was asking for those prisoners to be set free. On the second day, when the Hamas party offered that ceasefire, Israel said no. And for the next 6 days, the government again and again and again published both directly and through the top security journalists in the country that they are not interested in any kind of ceasefire until they bring Hamas to its knees. On the 8th day of fighting, after more than 200 people have already died, the Israeli government, along with the Egyptian government, which are both governments very hostile to the Hamas party, and two governments that are holding the entrances and exits of the Gaza Strip closed, despite the growing humanitarian disaster in the Gaza Strip, as more and more people are getting injured, they negotiated together a proposal, which was given to the Hamas party only minutes before the ceasefire was to go into effect. Hamas's main political rival, the Islamic Jihad, immediately said no. And then inside the Hamas party, half the party said yes, the other half of the party said no. And because the ceasefire proposal included no terms whatsoever except for the end of firing, the Hamas party eventually said no. The other thing they were taking into consideration is the fact that the day the war ends, the world will stop paying attention to the Gaza Strip. And the siege, unless it is part of the ceasefire agreements, will continue as it has for the past 8 years. Knowing that, they knew that the only thing they would get out of this war is that a lot of citizens have died, a lot of people have died, a lot of homes have been destroyed, thousands of people are injured, and nothing has changed. So they decided to keep fighting until something changes. So since then, until today, time and time again, despite the Israeli government pushing through the world press that Hamas is not interested in a ceasefire, the Hamas party again and again proposed a ceasefire based on one basic term, and the siege on the Gaza Strip. A blockade that by many international experts is completely illegal. Israel, of course, is not interested in this term and is continuing to fight. What is going to happen from now is uncertain because every day more and more soldiers are getting killed. Usually in these operations, when soldiers begin to die, public opinion changes and people don't want the war to continue. This time around, what we're seeing is more and more soldiers are dying, the more and more rage is growing against the Hamas party, and more are we seeing support in the Israeli public for the brutal assault on the Gaza Strip. And the range of public discourse, as I'm going to show in the story that's going to come out next week, the range of public discourse in the news and in the public sphere is almost unilaterally in support of the government. There's almost no debate about the legality or the morality of this operation.
Yeah, Lia, I look forward to seeing that report, and thank you for this report. We greatly appreciate your work there.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.